What's up everyone, my name is Mistic and welcome back to Mistic Rex. Today I'm watching a video about pranks that got people killed. I thankfully have never really been pranked. Obviously not that bad, but I don't really have any pranks that stand out that much in my mind right now. The only thing that's even close is maybe like the would you want this or double it? Someone came up to me like years ago. I was like, do you want like these pennies or double it? So obviously I said double it. But let's get into the video by Trust Me Bro and see how dumb it's probably gonna get. Wow. Link in the description.
Pranks that got people killed.
Mm-hmm.
Pranks can be so much fun. Whether you conduct
I
a
wouldn't
prank
know.
that's elaborate or simple, it really doesn't matter, because the best pranks are the ones where your victim is laughing just as hard as you are.
Right.
However, not all pranks are
And pranks that also aren't dangerous or feel dangerous. Because those kind of pranks are not good pranks. That's just mean.
built equally.
Right.
And like many things that become popular, there's always some people that take it way too far.
Right.
Which is why in this video, we are going to discuss pranks that unfortunately resulted in death. Now, the reasons for these deaths vary dramatically, but as we get deeper into this video, it's going to become obvious.
Usually it's people doing something that seems harmful and they get shot. That's usually what you see in the news with these types of things.
That some of these pranks aren't even pranks at all.
Right.
They're literally just crime packaged as a prank, and the
Right.
results are disturbing. Let's begin. Ding Dong Ditch Disaster. It was a
Okay.
warm summer night in the suburbs of Houston. 11-year-old Julian Guzman and his 10-year-old cousin were at a family birthday party. The party started earlier in the day, but as the clock grew later and later, the two boys became bored. And around roughly 10:55,
I've never done like ding dong ditching, toilet paper stuff, or like any of those things as a kid. I did not get out at all.
they decided that they should ditch the birthday party and do something more fun, playing pranks. So they
Okay.
left the party through the back gate and decided to walk through the neighborhood to find a house that they could ding-dong ditch. And quickly, they set their sights on a blue house on the corner of the street. The two boys took turns running up to the door, knocking on it, and running away. And over the course of 15 minutes, these two boys knocked on the door 3 times.
Okay.
Although it was on the third ding-dong ditch where things went.
Isn't it supposed to be like once or twice and then you get done?
Went terribly wrong.
Okay.
The house that these two boys were ding-dong ditching was not empty, and inside lived a 42-year-old man named Gonzales Leon Jr.,
Okay.
a U.S. Army veteran. Gonzales was aware of the boys knocking on his door, but instead of giving the boys the reaction they wanted, he did something else, something drastic. As the two boys came out of the bushes after hiding from their second ring and approached the house for their third ring, Julian was recording on his phone and his cousin was standing right there with them. The two boys knocked and banged on the door and they began to run away. However, this time as they ran away from the house, they saw the homeowner exit this side of the property, essentially ambushing them in the middle of the street. Gonzales allegedly stepped out of the shadows from his side yard, walked into the street behind the two young boys, saw the boys, and shot a warning shot into the ground to scare them. This initial shot was already insane and had the two young boys terrified, leaving them sprinting down the road. But Gonzales did not stop there. After shooting into the ground, he raised his pistol and shot directly at the two boys, striking Julian multiple times, causing him to collapse in the street only a block away. Julian's cousin did his absolute best to try to drag the boy to safety.
That is insane behavior.
Help did come, but unfortunately, the following day in hospital,
Those are kids.
Julian was pronounced dead. The following day, Gonzales was detained and questioned by police but released. And on September 2nd of 2025, Gonzales was officially arrested by a SWAT team holding him at gunpoint, where he was captured and remains in jail to this very day. Currently, Gonzales is facing charges of murder, harm to a child, and there is even discussion of the charge being upgraded to capital murder because the victim was a minor. As of now, his bond is set to $1.3 million. And requests to lower it have been denied. I wanted to start this video with this story specifically because I felt like it was the most polarizing. On one hand, you have one of the most timeless, classic, simple, harmless pranks there is, that I'm assuming many of you watching have done yourself. However, on the other end, you have the reaction to that prank, which resulted in the death of an 11-year-old boy.
But like, there's no reason to do that for like a kid. Like, you could argue if they were adults, maybe they were like worried about, like, I don't know, like someone casing the house. But like, those are kids, so like, why would, like, the first shot obviously bad. Why would you follow up
boy
when they
in
were
an extremely
leaving?
traumatic situation for a 10-year-old boy, as well as all of the family members who are still suffering the pain of this loss that
Right.
happened not even a year ago. People that have been following this trial and situation closely believe firmly that this was in no way, shape, or form self-defense or manslaughter,
Of course
claiming
not.
that Gonzalez knew that there was children knocking at his door and that the excessive force he used was beyond irresponsible or negligent. It was
Right.
downright diabolical. And I do find it hard to disagree with that. While having children knocking at your door may initially be scary, considering it was late at night, or at the very least annoying, once you have determined that there is children knocking on your door, which would be obvious by their appearance, there are so many different ways to handle the situation. And the route that Gonzalez took, in my opinion, is simply disturbing. News articles claimed that these 3 ding-dong ditches happened within 15 minutes, meaning that if Gonzalez was truly scared for his life, he would have had ample time to call the police. However, instead of doing that, or instead of even yelling at the kids, which would have likely scared them plenty, he decided to not only shoot a warning shot, but then shoot fatal shots at a child who was simply trying to play a prank. The fact that this prank was so simple and so harmless and had such an extreme byproduct, to me, makes it possibly one of the most disheartening on this entire list. And as you'll see with some of the other pranks we're going to discuss, there are numerous situations where people played much more horrible pranks, putting that in air quotes,
imagine.
and did not face nearly the consequences that Julian
I can
Guzman
think of
did.
a
But yeah,
few.
the situation is undoubtedly tragic, and the fact it happened so recently only makes it that much more sensitive. The chair pull prank. Danny Vasquez was a 25-year-old man who worked at a meat processing plant in Pennsylvania. It's alleged that Danny liked to play pranks, but it was one prank in particular that unfortunately resulted in the loss of Danny's life. During one of his lunch breaks, Danny was in the break room with a few other coworkers. One of his older coworkers, Peter, who was 32 at the time, walked up to a table and was about to take a seat. Although right as Peter was about to sit down, Danny pulled the chair from under him, causing Peter to fall on his butt and become enraged. But Peter didn't act on this rage at that time. He simply got up, looked at Danny, and told him, "I'll get you for that," and left the room. That was seemingly the end of the story until the following day, when Peter allegedly confronted Danny about his actions, and it resulted in the two men wrestling each other to the floor, and then Peter quickly choking and stabbing Danny nearly to death. It didn't take long for coworkers to hear the confrontation that was going on, but by the time they were able to break up the fight, Danny was already brutally beaten. And unfortunately, not long after this attack, Danny was pronounced dead at the hospital. As coworkers broke up the fight, they gave most of their attention to Danny, and this unfortunately gave Peter the perfect escape, although he didn't go far. After Danny was taken to the hospital and authorities were notified of what had happened, police later found Peter hiding in a shed with a note and stab wounds that he had caused on himself. The note simply read, "See you in hell, life for life." And Peter was quickly taken to the hospital and then to jail. To me, this prank is another example of a simple, semi-harmless prank that was taken way too far. Although you could argue this prank was not as innocent as the first we discussed, primarily because this prank was conducted by an adult as well.
It feels like it was probably just like ego being embarrassed or something. That's what it probably was. Like if someone was in the room with them or something, maybe.
Well as the fact that this prank could result in some injury, albeit likely minor if that. That being said, this relatively common and likely innocent-meaning prank and prankster was met
They're
with
definitely going to get a lot more
disproportionate consequences
not
and
innocent.
unfortunately the loss of their life. The note that was found in the shed with Peter is definitely an eye-opener as to how he could have been mentally at the time, which was likely not great. Although that is no excuse for the violence that he expressed onto his coworker. Although it is a bit of a morbid reminder that you truly never know what somebody is one prank away from doing. And in this case, something that may seem as harmless and as funny as simply pulling the chair from your coworker could result in your death. And while the prank itself was definitely not kind, talking to HR and having your coworker written up would, in my opinion, be a much more reasonable consequence than physical violence and death. And with that, I want to place a quick landmark in this video. So far, we've discussed pranks that, in my opinion, are relatively innocent and harmless. Although, the next handful of pranks we're going to discuss show a stark contrast between the two we've discussed so far. Mainly because these pranks become...
The only ones I can think of is, like, people pretending to rob, people pretending to, like, have explosives on them, or people, like, pretending to, like, hijack a car are the ones that come to mind. Are there any more that come to mind? I don't think so. I think those are, like, the main ones that I think of when I think of prank turned deadly, is like just pretending to do a crime.
More and more devious, and near the end of the list resembles something that doesn't even look like a prank at all, and would more accurately be described as attempted murder. But we'll get there. Let's continue. The fatal prank call. Jacinta Saldana was an Indian nurse working in the United Kingdom. She was born in 1966 and emigrated to London, England in 2002. 10 years later, in December of 2012, Jacinta was working at a hospital in London and staying in the nurses' quarters. And she did so because she worked so frequently, it was more convenient to live on premises than live at home with her family. On the 2nd of December in 2012, the St. James Palace publicly announced that Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was pregnant. And 2 days later, Princess Catherine found herself in the hospital that Jacinta was working in, as she was experiencing extremely uncomfortable morning sickness. After...
Okay, if I had to think, I'm guessing maybe the nurse did some kind of prank about maybe like the baby? What is it?
Allegedly hearing rumors that the royals may be present in a hospital, 2 radio hosts from Sydney, Australia determined that it would be hilarious to call the hospital to try to prank call nurses and doctors taking care of the princess. On December 4th at roughly 5:30 in the morning London time, or 4:30 p.m. Sydney, Australia time, radio hosts Mel Gregg and Mike Christian called the hospital that Princess Catherine was staying in and got into a conversation with Jacinta, the main nurse at the hospital at the time. The female radio host Mel Gregg started the phone call by impersonating Queen Elizabeth II, asking Jacinta if she could speak to her granddaughter, Kate. And Jacinta responded, "Oh yes, hold on ma'am," assuming that she was speaking to the actual...
What? Okay, yeah. I feel like there's no way the impression was that good. And there's no way, I don't... Did they not have, like, a phone of her own? Like the princess, queen, whatever she was?
Queen, because who else would be calling at 5:30 in the morning asking for their granddaughter? Or at least impersonating the queen at such an odd hour. Or
I don't know, most people.
Regardless, after the radio hosts were transferred to the nurse who was taking primary care of the princess, the radio hosts were able to maintain a 2-minute-long conversation drawing out sensitive details about her well-being and situation in the hospital. Following that 2-minute call, the radio hosts hung up, and the employees at the hospital had no idea what had just happened. Until the following day on December 5th, when the radio officially broadcasted the prank that they had just played. However, once this prank had gone public, it was not met with the overwhelmingly positive reception they likely expected. With multiple
Why would they think
that
had have a positive reaction?
That the radio show went too far by wasting a hospital's time or trying to intrude on the medical privacy of individuals.
Right.
It was for that reason that on the following day, December 6th, the radio station did air a brief apology for any inconvenience caused by the prank, but then later in that same apology went to promote the prank on their Twitter page. However, while for the radio hosts turned pranksters, this may have been the end of the situation for them, it definitely wasn't the end of the situation for the victims of this prank, one of which being Jacinta Saldana, who unfortunately on December 7th was found by security in the nurses' quarters unresponsive, and it was determined that she had died on her own terms, for lack of better terms, unfortunately. It was reported that Jacinta had left 3 handwritten notes. The first blaming the radio station stunt entirely for her death, the second giving clear plans on how she wanted her funeral arranged, and the third blaming her employer for not treating the situation with more respect and care, although the full extent of the details on that are unknown. However, what we do know is that the nurses who were the victims of these pranks were not reprimanded by the hospital they worked at. They were protected by the hospital, and the hospital blamed the radio station for journalistic trickery, claiming that no nurse should have to deal with such a thing. However, those are public statements, and whatever happened behind closed doors is not known. Following this incident, the 2 radio hosts were fired, the show was canceled, although the radio station did continue operating, and neither of the radio hosts nor did the radio station see any formal legal repercussions for this incident. Like I mentioned at the end of the last section, this was kind of a
what
turning
would
point
be
in the
the
video,
repercussions?
because
I
while
don't
prank calls
know
are some of the
Australia
most harmless
laws.
and fun and simple pranks that are around, on a simple level, this was no simple prank call. This wasn't you and your friends dialing random numbers in your friend's basement at a slumber party. This was an extremely deliberate prank that not only involved royalty, but also involved hardworking people that were not only distracted from their job for something completely pointless, but also put in positions that left them vulnerable to scrutiny, as well as breaching patient-caregiver confidentiality. Prank calls at their core can be simple and harmless, but I think this prank call had a bit more malice behind it than the typical prank call. And unfortunately, the byproduct was completely and utterly tragic and avoidable. All these radio hosts had to do was leave hardworking people alone. But instead, they thought they would get a laugh out of pretending to be royalty, using those false pretenses to get information about royals, and it ultimately resulted in the death of a hardworking woman who didn't deserve any of this.
People who like do news and like journaling for like celebrities and stuff, or like especially royalty, they do some insane things to like get people to look at their journaling stuff to get clicks and to get the information. It's
Compressed
insane.
air casualty. Ravinder Kumar was a 40-year-old man working at a wood processing plant in India. At home, he had a wife, 2 sons, and a daughter, and he worked at this wood processing plant for the last 9 years to support his family. And while he struggled to make ends meet, he did his best, although he was ridiculed at work for his low economic status and alleged tattered clothes. On one fateful day, Ravinder was working with his coworker, Anjan Misra, who allegedly commonly made fun of Ravinder for his economic status. However, in case making fun of somebody for simply being poor was not bad enough, Anjan decided to take his criticism a lot further. While working side by side at the plant, Ravinder had to bend over to pick up a block of wood. And it was a moment like this that Anjan had been waiting for, because in his hand he held a compressed air hose, a crucial tool the two used at the plywood factory. This air hose was extremely high pressure and was specifically designed to be used for industrial purposes only. And it was known that this level of high pressure...
Is he gonna like try and get him in the when he bends down? I hope not. That would like
pointed at
rip
your
him
skin or
open.
at anybody at all. However, Anjan wanted to completely disregard that, because as Ravinder bent over to simply do his job, Anjan decided to point the high-pressure nozzle at the rectum of Ravinder, allegedly as a prank. However, what followed was high-pressure air being sent through the intestines of Ravinder, rupturing internal organs, tearing tissue, and causing air to be introduced into his bloodstream, causing Ravinder to instantly collapse onto the ground, where he was first laughed at by coworkers and then eventually taken away for medical treatment, where he unfortunately died in hospital. After Ravinder was confirmed to be dead, investigators went back to the factory to figure out what exactly happened. They first spoke to the owner of the factory, who almost comically claimed that Ravinder must have died of some sort of stomach issue, and that he had stomach issues for his entirety of his time working at the factory. And while that may or may not be true, it was obvious to authorities that he didn't simply die of a stomachache, and that his injuries were much more severe than anything that could have happened naturally. Following their interview with the owner of the factory, they talked to Anjan himself, who claimed that he didn't mean to blow air into Ravinder's body, and that he was simply trying to taunt him for having holes in his pants, obviously because he was poor. Although, in an article posted in the Indian Express, a cousin of Ravinder who helped him at the hospital said, quote, "I helped Ravinder take off his clothes before surgery. There was no tears in his pants or undergarments. He was attacked." Meaning that it was very likely that Anjan was simply trying to make up an excuse for why he would possibly be blowing air into his coworker's rectum. Regardless, after authorities were able to watch the CCTV footage of what actually happened, it was obvious that Anjan was at fault and he was promptly arrested, although that did not bring back
so there were
Ravinder.
cameras, and that was not the first thing they did. The first thing they did was not to look at cameras before interviewing people, so they knew what to interview about. That was not their first thing they did. Huh. Interesting. Interesting.
Remove the emotional trauma that his family now has to carry for the rest of their lives. This, for me, is where pranks no longer become pranks. because at the very least, this prank could be considered sexual assault. But as we've seen, unfortunately, the worst case scenario happened, and the victim of this prank literally died due to the negligence and irresponsibility of the so-called prankster. Assuming that the individual who used the compressed air on Ravinder even had a slight clue about how high pressure that air was, he would have had to have known that the effects of that on the human body could have been catastrophic.
Right. I assumed
And
it would
while
have
it's
just
not necessarily a
ripped him
secret that
open.
industrial jobs in countries like India don't always have the best safety standards, I don't think it's
I don't
unfair
think
to
any
assume
country
that
has that good of
individuals
safety
working in this
standards.
plywood plant likely had some idea that compressed air is dangerous. And to
Right.
this day, it's really not sure whether or not this was a deliberate attack or simply a prank that turned deadly due to pure negligence.
Probably
Regardless,
half and
the
half.
result was the same. Ravinder lost his life, and that is truly so devastating. And with that, like I mentioned previously, it's only going to become harder to even draw the line between what
Okay.
is a prank and what is just criminal negligence. And where you
Okay.
draw that line in this video is completely up to you.
Uh-oh.
The rock throwing prank. Zachary, Nicholas, and Joseph were three 18-year-old boys who lived in Denver, Colorado. These young
Okay.
men were not described by peers as model citizens, and they liked to partake in some rather degenerate behavior. On one fateful night in 2023, the three boys were hanging out when they
2023.
decided to play some pranks.
Okay.
A prank they unfortunately had played before, and they decided to all huddle into one truck and drive to a Walmart parking lot, where they then collectively started gathering large decorative landscaping rocks from the Walmart parking lot to later use for
What
their
Walmart has
prank.
rocks?
Once the three men had at least 10 rocks each, they decided to hit the road. And what they did next was absolutely mind-blowing. The three boys decided that they were going to drive down the highway and throw these massive 7 to 15-pound rocks at passing.
No, that is not a prank. It's like calling people like hitting. Well, no, it's not that, because this one's way more dangerous. But like people hitting like mailboxes with like bats and stuff. That's not prank. That's just destruction. This is attempted murder. Because like if it hits, not only if it hits like the window and breaks the glass that killed him, but also just the reaction of like swerving like off the road, because you don't know what's gonna happen. You don't know why they're doing it. Like if that happened to me, I would assume like a group was trying to kill me, and this was like the first step of that happening. So yeah, not a prank. Not a prank. I imagine someone's probably gonna swerve and crash. My first instinct.
by cars on the highway. Later, when questioned by police, Nicholas claimed that all three of the men threw at least 10 rocks each at oncoming cars, causing severe damage to other vehicles on the road. Although, unfortunately, that wasn't the most
How do you
damaging thing they did that
even
night.
file
As
an
one of the
insurance on
rocks
that?
thrown by the driver of the vehicle, unfortunately went directly through the windshield
Yeah.
of 20-year-old Alexa Bartel and killed her instantly. It's alleged that once the rock struck this woman's vehicle, the three men cheered, and once they saw that her car had driven off the road, they quickly fled the scene. And it wasn't until other motorists noticed a car in the ditch that authorities were notified, and the grim discovery was found. Alexa was found deceased in her vehicle, and investigators had a lot of work to do. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for investigators to get leads on who could have possibly done it and begin questioning. And almost as soon as the questioning began with these three teenagers, the truth began to come out, and confessions
How do they
coupled with
find
video
them?
and photo evidence of the crimes taking place made it rather easy for investigators and authorities to put together a strong case against these men who had just murdered this innocent woman. Following the arrest of these three men, they were promptly put on trial and served the following sentences. Joseph, the man who was alleged to be the ringleader of the entire operation and the man who threw the rock that ended up killing Alexa, is
Okay.
currently serving a mandatory life sentence for his
Okay,
murder
that's
conviction. And the other two
basically
men
25
pled guilty
years.
to both charges of first-degree murder and first-degree assault, serving between 20 and 32 years in prison and 35 and 72 for the other, meaning that all three of these men are going to be spending a lot of time behind bars for their
Yippee!
reckless and
Good.
idiotic actions. In my opinion, it's hard to even call such a reckless and stupid act a prank, but I'm putting it on
Right.
this list because these 18-year-olds themselves considered this to be a prank. And while I don't think anybody with more than one brain cell would agree, I think it goes to show exactly how crazy people are willing to get in the name of pranks, or how much people are willing to allow themselves to do by simply lying to themselves and justifying it as just a prank.
Or I don't know. They might have just said that to get lighter sentences, because they might not have thought it was a prank. They might have just thought maybe if we say it's a prank, they'll just let us go.
When in
Seems
reality,
like
as we've seen,
typical
the
logic of
consequences can be
teens.
deadly. But I just wanted to say that this is the first video I've ever made about crazy, deadly pranks. And if you
Is
found it
it?
interesting and would like to see a part 2, please leave a like or leave a comment below saying part 2. It's no
Okay.
secret that YouTube is not a fan of dark, morbid content, although I do believe that there is valuable
I
lessons
don't
to be
feel like
learned
that's
in these truly upsetting
true.
situations. Which is why, if you guys
Like
want more videos, I would be
monetized why
happy
they
to make them.
don't.
According to YouTube, only 70% of
But
you are subscribed, so if you
analytics
want to see new
wise,
videos from me every single week, hit the subscribe button.
they
But with that,
definitely
let's get to the
do.
final entry on this list. Firework fatality. On October 28th, 2021, only a few days before Halloween, 2 teenage boys decided to get up to some trouble. These teenagers were 18-year-old Kai Cooper and his 15-year-old friend, 2 teenagers who were
Okay.
known to be troubled individuals. It was on this night when they were hanging out and bored, and decided that their best course of action was to go buy fireworks from a local corner store and see exactly what kind of trouble they could get up to with said fireworks. The 18-year-old Kai walked into a fireworks store and bought 10 megaburst fireworks for under £9. And after leaving the fireworks store with the goods, Cooper allegedly stated, "People are going to be terrorized tonight." And then they went to a separate store where they would buy lighters and begin their reign of terror. The 2 boys would walk around their city of Rumford, East London, England, throwing lit fireworks at people, with the 2 boys encouraging each other to do more and more heinous things. CCTV footage was actually able to capture Cooper buying the fireworks, and the 2 boys
Did
throwing
it?
fireworks at individuals
I
outside.
couldn't see
However,
shit.
while throwing fireworks at individuals is already dangerous and deadly
Right.
enough, and in my opinion, nowhere near a prank, it doesn't end there. As the night continued, Cooper kept encouraging his 15-year-old friend to do more and more serious acts. And the
Okay.
result of this encouragement from the older boy led the younger boy to light a firework and put it in the mail slot of a random house that they were walking by. The 2 boys walked away and the firework went off and
Okay, that's insanely stupid. That's 100% gonna light the house on fire. Or cause, like, nearby stuff to catch on fire and explode. That is incredibly stupid. And if it's a letter thing, it might fall onto like paper, which will make the fire even bigger. How do they come up with this stuff as like teenagers? That is concerning.
side of this random home. Unfortunately, after this firework went off, it caused a massive fire to burst out
Yeah.
in this home, and this home was not vacant. Upstairs in this home, likely sleeping, was 88-year-old Josephine Smith, who had no connection to the boys and was simply an elderly woman who lived alone and was trying to get some sleep. The fire trapped this woman in her home, and the smoke likely filled the house before she could even realize what was going on. And by the time authorities made it on the scene, Josephine was pronounced dead due to smoke inhalation in her own bedroom. Eventually, when the 2 pranksters were caught, authorities were not having any of their prank excuses, and they claimed that this was an intentional attack, not deliberately to kill this individual, but to wreak havoc. And for that reason, Kai Cooper, the 18-year-old, was found guilty of both manslaughter and arson with recklessness, as he was the
Okay.
individual who bought the fireworks, bought the lighters, and encouraged the action that resulted in the death of the innocent elderly woman.
Right.
Cooper received 6 years in jail and 2 years of probation, and the younger of the 2 criminals
That is
received
not
3
enough.
years and 8 months in a youth facility. In my
Not
opinion,
enough.
relatively light crimes for an extremely reckless murder that wasn't a first-time offense.
Mhm.
Both of these individuals had experience intentionally causing public
They wouldn't even
disruption
be
and harm.
adults by the end
But
of their
I'm not a judge
sentence.
or a lawyer, so what do I know? Oh, and the man who sold the fireworks to Kai
Actually, they
also
would.
had his fireworks license suspended for 1 year. The family of Josephine Smith have also called for tighter regulations on the sale of fireworks in the United Kingdom, specifically increasing the age to 21, making there be a minimum spend of £50, and also doing tighter background checks on who they're
Minimum spend of £50 is insane. But interesting that they would have it as 21 instead of like 18, because that's like their drinking age, ain't it?
selling fireworks to, although these have not yet been implemented. Like I
Okay.
always say, every time I discuss crime, death, or murder on this channel, I try to make a conscious effort to be as respectful as possible, as
Right.
these are real people that actually lost their lives, with families that actually lost a loved one, and that should not be lost on any of us. I want to thank you all for watching this video, and if you're not quite done your bro binge now, and you maybe want a bit of a palate cleanse, check out the video on screen right now.
There you go. Video down below. If you made it this far, let me know what was the worst prank you ever experienced down below. And stay safe. Until next time, bye.